In a quiet corner of the Pacific, entire warships sit exactly where they went down. Holes upright. Aircraft still in hangars. This lagoon once anchored a major naval base, busy with repairs, supply runs, and daily routines. Then a single operation changed everything, and those routines stopped without warning. Today, the ships rest in clear, relatively shallow water, sealed off from time. Divers describe a strange calm, like stepping into a moment that history paused and never restarted. This is the story of the ghost fleet of Chuuk Lagoon. Welcome to Shipwreck History. This is the final video in our ghost ship series. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and help support our channel. And don't forget to check out our other videos in the series. In early 1944, Chuuk Lagoon was Japan's most fortified naval base in the Pacific. The lagoon sits in Micronesia, roughly 2,000 miles southeast of Tokyo, where a barrier reef creates a natural harbor, vast enough to anchor an entire fleet. The Japanese Imperial Navy had transformed this location into their headquarters in the Pacific, building the most fortified naval base outside Japan itself. By February 1944, the lagoon had become critical to sustaining Japan's war across the Pacific. Warships, cargo vessels, oil tankers, and submarines crowded the anchorage. Every day brought new arrivals carrying supplies bound for Japanese forces on other islands. Protected by distance and heavy defenses, the base had operated for 2 years without serious challenge. It seemed untouchable. The scale of operations was staggering. At any given time, dozens of ships moved through the area. Aircraft lined the runways of 5 separate airfields built across the islands. Repair facilities operated around the clock, servicing damaged vessels and aircraft returning from combat. Supply depots held months' worth of ammunition, fuel, and provisions. The lagoon was more than just a parking spot for warships. It was a self-contained logistics hub that kept Japan's entire Pacific operation running. If they lost Chuuk, the supply chain would collapse. American codebreakers knew better. Intelligence reports revealed exactly what sat in that lagoon: a massive concentration of ships and supplies that had become impossible to ignore. The timing made Chuuk an obvious target. American forces were pushing through the Marshall Islands, and this base represented the last major obstacle to controlling the Central Pacific. Neutralized Chuuk, and Japan's ability to reinforce or resupply the island would collapse. The Japanese had sensed the danger and moved their largest warships to safer waters. But the merchant fleet stayed behind, along with hundreds of aircraft and enough supplies to sustain operations for months. February 17, 1944, dawn breaks over Chuuk Lagoon. The fleet rests at anchor, most crews still asleep. Then the sky fills with aircraft. Carriers Enterprise, Intrepid, Essex, and Yorktown had positioned themselves in darkness and launched their strikes before sunrise. Over 500 aircraft descended on the base in coordinated waves, fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo planes hitting targets across the lagoon simultaneously. The Japanese had almost no warning. Ships scrambled to raise anchor and man their guns, as anti-aircraft fire erupted across the water. But the attack was already overwhelming. Many vessels never even got their engines started. The destruction followed a pattern. American dive bombers targeted the larger merchant vessels first, the ones carrying the most valuable cargo. Torpedo planes went after tankers and warships, aiming below the waterline where damage would be catastrophic. Fighters attacked anything that moved: aircraft on runways, personnel on decks, and gun crews firing from shore. The Japanese fought back where they could, but their aircraft were caught on the ground or trapped in the holds of cargo ships. By midday on the 17th, the outcome was already clear. Cargo ships carrying fighter aircraft burned where they sat. Oil tankers erupted into flames that spread across the water's surface. When ammunition ships exploded, the blast shook the entire lagoon. The attack didn't stop. It continued through the 17th and into the 18th, when American forces launched the first carrier-based night strike in naval history. For 2 straight days, aircraft returned in waves, systematically destroying everything they could find. American losses were relatively light: 25 aircraft and their crews, nothing compared to what was happening below. When the smoke cleared, more than 40 ships lay at the bottom of the lagoon. Another 275 aircraft were destroyed, some scattered across the seabed, others still trapped in the holds of sunken cargo vessels. The human cost cut deeper than the material losses. Approximately 4,500 Japanese servicemen died in those 2 days. The lagoon that had been Japan's fortress had become a tomb. The Japanese abandoned the base immediately. No salvage operation followed, no attempt to rebuild. The ships had gone down in water too deep for Japan's divers to reach, and in 48 hours, one of their most critical bases had been eliminated. The consequences spread across the Pacific. Japanese forces on outlying islands had depended on Chuuk for supplies and reinforcement. Now they were cut off. Equipment piled up in Japanese ports, with nowhere to send it. The American island hopping campaign, which had taken months of careful planning for each objective, suddenly accelerated. What had seemed like an impenetrable fortress had become a graveyard in just days. Japan would never come back from it. For decades, the wreck sat untouched. Coral began growing across steel hulls. Schools of fish moved into spaces where men had worked, and over time, the ocean slowly transformed the battlefield into something else. In 1969, Jacques Cousteau and his team arrived to explore what had been left behind. His documentary, Lagoon of Lost Ships, revealed something remarkable. The ships hadn't just sunk, they'd been preserved. Vessels sat upright on the bottom with cargo still secured in their holds. Artifacts remained scattered exactly where they'd fallen. The film showed engine rooms, mess halls, and bridges that looked untouched by time, as if the crews had simply stepped away and never returned. The footage brought global attention to what had become known as the Ghost Fleet of Chuuk Lagoon. Two of the most famous wrecks in the Ghost Fleet are the Fujikawa Maru and the San Francisco Maru. The Fujikawa Maru sits upright at 120 feet, one of dozens of armed cargo ships that had kept Japan's war effort supplied across the Pacific. Divers exploring her holds discovered 0 fighter aircraft still inside. Artillery shells and depth charges remained stacked where they were loaded. Aircraft parts still fill the cargo spaces. The bridge stands intact, and its telegraph is frozen mid-signal, while coral grows through the windows. This single ship captures what Japan was shipping to the war, and what they lost as a result of the attack. The San Francisco Maru sits deeper, and divers call her the million-dollar wreck for good reason. She'd survived the first day anchored near one of the islands, but aircraft found her on February 18th. Her cargo holds contain a complete military arsenal, tanks with intact treads, trucks positioned as if waiting to roll off the deck, mines and torpedoes still secured in their racks. A bulldozer remains chained down, ready for construction work at some island airfield it never reached. Human remains found aboard were treated with proper respect, because this vessel didn't just carry cargo. It held an entire operation that got packed into steel and sent to the bottom before it could be used. The human presence lingers throughout the fleet. Sake bottles are scattered in crew quarters. Shoes look like someone just stepped out of them. Gas masks look neatly placed down where they were last left. Personal belongings lay where they landed in those final moments. The preservation is almost unsettling in its completeness. In the Fujikawa Maru's engine room, tools hang on their racks as if the engineers just stepped out. Gauges and dials remain readable through layers of coral. The galley still has cooking equipment in place. Deeper in the San Francisco Maru, divers find medical supplies and communications equipment still in their original locations. These wrecks are different from other dive sites, not just for what went down with them, but for how little it has changed. The ships look ready to sail, frozen mid-operation, surrounded by 80 years of salt water and silence. These aren't just historical sites, they're graves for the thousands who never left. The individual wrecks tell their own stories, but together they reveal something bigger. By late 1944, the volume of material moving through Chuuk Lagoon reveals just how desperate Japan's situation had become. Some cargo remains unidentified, classified equipment, and unknown weapon systems, materials that archaeologists still work to understand decades later. Marine archaeologists have mapped and documented these sites systematically, drawing insights about Japanese logistics, manufacturing, and strategic priorities during the war's final years. Some areas stay restricted because ammunition and explosives still sit in corroded casings that might be dangerous. Other sections remain closed out of respect for the human remains that couldn't be recovered. The lagoon functions as both an archaeological site and cemetery, protected under international law as a war grave where salvage is prohibited. That protection matters for another reason: environmental concerns. The ships recoil slowly, but continuously. And the ecosystem that grew around these wrecks now faces contamination from the vessels that created it. Yet despite the risks, the battlefield has become a sanctuary. The wrecks function as artificial reefs, supporting marine life across the lagoon. Coral blankets every surface, while fish occupy spaces that once held ammunition. What was built to destroy now sustains life. Thousands of divers visit annually, exploring these sites while remembering what happened here. The ghost fleet of Chuuk Lagoon remains frozen at the moment everything ended. More than 40 ships, 275 aircraft, and 4,500 lives, all claimed by the lagoon. It remains history's largest ghost fleet, and perhaps the most accessible window into a moment when the balance of the Pacific War shifted irrevocably. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share, and let us know in the comments what shipwrecks you want us to cover next. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. And until next time, keep exploring.